Podcasting in Indonesia, the latest from podnews.net with Podscribe using ChatGPT for brand safety. Indonesian podcasting is going through a period of real and exciting change. Some would even argue that it's reaching an inflection point. In our study of podcasting in Indonesia, we discover the Joe Rogan of the country, why many Indonesians confuse a YouTube video with a podcast, and the history of the medium. You'll find it linked from our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. O'Tonal has released the English version of the Survey of Podcast Usage in Japan, a yearly survey conducted with the Asahi Shimbun Company. 28.1% of 15 to 29-year-olds use podcasts monthly, says the research. Overall, there's been an increase in Japanese podcast listeners, but it's still comparatively low at 15.7%. Guangjin Yo took a deep dive for Pod News into Japanese podcasting in February. Joe Rogan's contract isn't being renewed this year, Spotify tells Pod News following our story yesterday. Spotify wouldn't tell us any more details, though. One thing not being renewed, WordPress's Anchor plugin, which is to close. It was a service that would make podcasts from your blog posts. Creators were given just 15 days' notice. The Podcast Show 2023 has unveiled a preview night lineup and an international industry advisory panel. Preview night tickets are going for £65. We don't quite know whether the promo code PODNEWS works for those, but worth giving it a go, why not? 45% of podcast agencies are struggling with their resourcing, says a new survey. Co-Host has released the State of Podcast Agencies 2023, promising insights into the podcast agency landscape, including the biggest constraints and opportunities facing them today. Radio Ambulante's contract with Vice News to produce El Hilo has been terminated, according to a tweet. It's a turning point, according to the company, which has kicked off a fundraising drive. Vice Media made 12 people redundant in November. Mark Cuban's Fireside has confirmed $25 million in funding. Fireside's all about streaming videos these days and bought a TV streaming platform last year. The winners of the Publisher Podcast Awards were announced. The Podcast of the Year went to Hot Money from the Financial Times. And I've given answers about my suggested podcast gear prior to the New Zealand Podcasting Summit. In People News, Acast has made a number of promotions in its Australia and New Zealand office. Kate Digby, Teresa Lai and Bryce Crosswell have been promoted to Group Business Directors, and Kieran Tobin has been promoted to Key Account Director for Independent Agencies. And in podcast news, Feel Better, Live More with Dr. Rangan Chatterjee is making its way to passengers on Qatar Airways with a new partnership with in-flight entertainment company Sparfax. Pro Podcast has announced a production partnership with LinkedIn for the business podcast Take the Lead. The Australia-based company was founded in 2016 and is also used by Acast, Media Week, Zero and a number of independent podcasts. Live, Laugh, Love is a new release today from Global and Lad Baby. Lad Baby have, we're told, become one of Britain's most well-known and best-loved families with a global audience of over 13 million. And what happens when you marry a person that's already got their partner in crime? Their package deal you didn't ask for. Goodness, I Married a Twin is almost the title of a new podcast from comedian Luke Kempner, his wife Alana McFarlane Kempner, and her twin sister Lisa McFarlane, except the real title is a bit saucier. It's produced by Avalon. This podcast is sponsored by Podscribe. Wondering if there's a better way we can be doing brand safety? Podscribe thinks so. It now uses ChatGPT to apply GARM labels. Join the waitlist at podscribe.com/blog. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.